It was meant to be the beginning of everything, a finish line that was also a starting gate. For 17 years, Alara had been running a race, and tomorrow, she would finally break the tape. The proof hung on her closet door, a whisper of polyester in the still air of her bedroom. Her graduation gown. It was a deep, royal blue, the color of a twilight sky just before the stars decide to show themselves. It looked like a hollowed-out version of her future self, waiting for her to step inside and give it a soul. She'd touch the sleeve every time she walked past, the fabric cool and smooth under her fingertips, a strange and formal texture that didn't belong in a room still filled with childhood books and concert ticket stubs pinned to a corkboard. It was the uniform for the first day of the rest of her life. On her desk, next to a wilting daisy and a jam jar, was the speech. 10 pages, double-spaced, a constellation of carefully chosen words meant to define her entire high school existence. Valedictorian. The word itself felt heavy, important. She picked up the stack of papers, the edges softened from how many times she'd handled them. She could feel her own heartbeat in the thin sheaf of paper. Her voice, her thoughts, her hopes, all distilled into a 10-minute performance. She cleared her throat, looking at her reflection in the dark screen of her laptop. To the class of 2024, she began, her voice barely a murmur. We stand today on a bridge between the people we were and the people we have yet to become. She'd practiced it 100 times, yet a tremor still ran through her. It wasn't just stage fright. It was the sheer, terrifying scale of it. This was the moment everyone would remember her by. A floorboard creaked in the hallway, and her mom, Anna, leaned against the doorframe, a soft smile on her face. She'd been listening. It's beautiful, honey. You're going to make everyone cry. She walked in, her familiar scent of lavender and coffee filling the space around Alara. She ran a hand over the sleeve of the gown. I still can't believe it. It feels like just yesterday I was dropping you off at kindergarten and you were clinging to my leg like your life depended on it. Please don't start. Alara laughed, her cheeks flushing. You'll get me going and then my makeup will be a disaster tomorrow. Too late, her mom said, her eyes glistening. She pulled Alara into a hug, her arms strong and certain. It was a hug that said, I am so proud I might burst. Alara squeezed her back, burying her face in her mother's shoulder, breathing in the safety of it all. This was the bedrock of her world, this love, this unshakable pride. Later that evening, the house buzzed with a quiet, joyful energy. Her dad insisted on filming her practicing the speech for the archives, his phone held up with the director's seriousness that made her break into giggles every other sentence. Her little brother, Leo, sat on the floor, watching with wide, adoring eyes, occasionally shouting, Hooray, Alara, at random intervals. They ordered pizza, the greasy cardboard box sitting in the middle of their dining table like a trophy. It was all so perfectly, wonderfully normal, but when the house fell quiet, the feeling shifted. Back in her room, the silence had a different texture. It was heavier now, pressing in on her. The excitement that had buoyed her all day began to recede, leaving behind a strange, cold residue of anxiety. She walked to her window, pushing aside the curtain. The street was empty, bathed in the orange glow of a single streetlight. A car she didn't recognize, a dark, older model sedan, was parked a few houses down. It was probably nothing, someone visiting a neighbor, but her eyes snagged on it. It seemed out of place, a dark shape in the familiar landscape of her world. She watched it for a long minute, waiting for a door to open or for headlights to flash on, but it just sat there, silent and still. She let the curtain fall, her heart thudding a little too fast. Don't be stupid, Alara. She sat at her desk and opened her journal, its leather cover worn smooth from years of secrets. She wanted to capture the day, to pin down the fluttering feeling of happiness. She wrote about her mom's tears and her dad's terrible camera work. She wrote about how Leo had tried to wear her graduation cap and how it had swallowed his entire head. She smiled as she wrote. But then her pen paused over the page. The image of the car outside returned. A memory from earlier in the week surfaced, unbidden. She'd been walking home from Jess's house when a man had stopped her to ask for directions. He was new to the area, he'd said, but his eyes hadn't been looking at her. They'd been scanning the street, her house, her yard. He'd smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. She'd given him the directions quickly, her keys clutched in her fist, and had hurried inside, locking the door behind her. She hadn't thought about it again until now. A chill traced its way down her spine. She looked at the clean, empty page in her journal. A new thought, cold and sharp, pushed its way into her mind, and before she could stop it, her hand was moving, the pen scratching against the paper. What if I disappear and no one understands why? The word stared back at her, alien and terrifying. Where had that come from? It felt like someone else had written it. She slammed the journal shut, her breath catching in her throat. Her own handwriting looked foreign, menacing. It was just nerves. The pressure of the speech, the fear of the future, the suffocating weight of everyone's expectations. That's all it was. It had to be. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling her from the spiral. It was the group chat. Jess, I'm 100% going to cry when you give that speech, Ilara. No joke. Bringing tissues. Mark, don't trip. Seriously. All that work just to faceplant in front of the whole town. Jess, Mark, be nice. Ilara smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing. She typed back quickly. I make no promises. See you guys tomorrow. So excited. She put the phone down and took a deep breath, the moment of panic receding. She was being ridiculous. Everything was fine. More than fine. It was perfect. She got ready for bed, the familiar routine a comfort. She brushed her teeth, set her alarm for 6 a.m., and laid out the simple white dress she'd chosen to wear under her gown. She looked around her room one last time, at the gown hanging like a silent promise, at the speech sitting on her desk, at the life she had so carefully built. Tomorrow, it would all begin. She slipped into bed and turned off the light. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting a silver rectangle across her floor. In the darkness, the silhouette of the graduation gown was the only thing she could clearly see. It was waiting for her. Her future was waiting for her. She closed her eyes, but the image of the dark car down the street lingered behind her eyelids, and the silence of the house no longer felt peaceful. It felt like it was holding its breath. The silence of the house didn't just hold its breath, it began to suffocate. Ilara lay perfectly still under her covers, her eyes wide open in the dark, tracking the slow crawl of moonlight across her ceiling. Sleep was a distant country she couldn't find her way to. Every normal house-settling sound was magnified, twisted into something unfamiliar and sharp. The image of the dark sedan was burned onto the back of her eyelids, and then she heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint, so faint she thought she'd imagined it. A branch against the window pane, maybe. But the night was still, breathless. Tap, tap, tap. There it was again. Soft, deliberate. It wasn't a branch. It was a knuckle. Someone was at her window. Her blood went cold, a sheet of ice forming around her heart. Her bedroom was on the second floor. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. She listened, every nerve ending screaming. For a long minute, there was nothing but the frantic drumming in her own ears. Maybe she had imagined it, a hallucination brought on by stress and too much pizza. She was just about to let out the breath she was holding when it came again. Louder this time, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. A whisper of a voice followed, a sound so low it was more of a vibration against the glass. Ilara. Her mind raced. Who would be at her window? It wasn't a voice she recognized. It was low, calm, not threatening, but certain, as if it knew she was there, listening, as if it expected her to answer. Curiosity is a strange and powerful thing. It can override fear, logic, every self-preservation instinct. She told herself not to move. She told herself to scream for her dad. But her body was already betraying her. Slowly, silently, she slipped out of bed, her feet meeting the cold wood of the floor. She crept towards the window, like a moth drawn to a flame it knows will burn it. She pulled the curtain back just a fraction of an inch. There was no one there. The lawn below was empty. The dark car was gone. Had she dreamed it all? Was the pressure finally making her crack? She felt a profound sense of foolishness. Of course no one was there. She was letting her anxiety run away with her. She turned from the window, deciding to get a glass of water from the kitchen to clear her head. She opened her bedroom door as quietly as she could, stepping out into the darkened hallway and leaving the door slightly ajar, just as she always did. She didn't take her phone. Why would she? She was just going downstairs. She was planning to come right back. That was the last time she ever saw her room. The first sound of the new day was Alara's alarm. It went off at 6 a.m. sharp, its cheerful, chirping tone screaming into an empty space. It chirped for a full minute before silencing itself, plunging the room back into a quiet that was no longer peaceful, but hollow. The sun began to stream through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It lit up the smooth, unwrinkled sheets of a perfectly made bed. It lit up the white dress on the chair and the speech on the desk. It lit up a life, paused mid-sentence. At 6:45 a.m., Anna came to her daughter's door. She pushed it open, a bright smile on her face, ready to sing a terrible off-key good morning rendition like she always did on special mornings. "Time to shine, graduate," she began, but the words died in her throat. She saw the bed, empty. The smile on her face faltered, replaced by a flicker of puzzlement. Alara, she probably thought Alara was in the shower. She walked over to the bed, her hand smoothing down the duvet Alara hadn't even slept under. She picked up one of the pillows, fluffing it automatically. That's when the first real seed of wrongness was planted. The pillow was cold. She knocked on the bathroom door. "Honey? We've got a big day." There was no answer. She pushed the door open. The room was dark, the air still. The bath mat was dry. This is the point where confusion curdles into fear. Anna walked back into the room, her eyes darting around, searching for a clue, a reason. She saw her daughter's phone, plugged in and charging on the nightstand. She saw her wallet on the dresser. She saw her car keys hanging on their hook by the door. Alara hadn't run away. Anna knew you don't run away without your phone, your money, or your car. She rushed from the room, her footsteps quick and loud in the quiet house. "David!" she yelled for her husband, her voice tight with a panic she was trying to suppress. "David, have you seen Alara?" Her husband was in the kitchen pouring coffee. He looked up confused. "I thought she was sleeping in." "She's not in her room. Her bed hasn't been slept in." The search began then. A frantic, heart-pounding tour of their own home, calling Alara's name into rooms they knew were empty. The basement, the attic, the garage. With every silent room, the panic grew, clawing its way up their throats. Anna grabbed Alara's phone from the room, her hands shaking as she unlocked it. She called Jess. She called Mark. Both answered, groggy with sleep. No, they hadn't heard from Alara. By 8 a.m., the house that had been filled with so much joy the night before was a tomb of rising terror. Leo sat on the stairs, his face pale, understanding only that the adults were scared, and that meant he should be too. At 8:15 a.m., David picked up the phone. His hand was steady, a stark contrast to the tremor in his wife's, but his knuckles were white. He took a deep, shuddering breath and made the call that would change everything. The call that officially marked the moment Alara went from being a girl who was late to a girl who was missing. The arrival of the first police car was a quiet, final surrender. It didn't use its siren, but its presence sliced through the morning stillness of the suburban street, a stark announcement of failure. David stood on the porch to meet them, his shoulders slumped, his face a gray mask. He led 2 uniformed officers into the home. The front door, usually wide open to welcome friends, closed behind them with a click that sounded like a lock on a cage. The house was no longer a home, it was a scene. The officers walked through the living room, their heavy boots scuffing the rug Anna had vacuumed just the day before. Their eyes were sharp, missing nothing. They saw the half-eaten box of pizza from the night before, a relic of a happiness that now felt ancient. They saw Leo peeking from behind the sofa, his small face etched with a fear he couldn't name. Anna sat at the dining room table, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug she wasn't drinking. She answered their questions in a voice that was thin and brittle. "When was the last time you saw her?" one officer asked. "Last night," she whispered. "Around 10. We were all in the living room. She was practicing her speech." Her voice broke on the last word. "Did she seem upset? Was she acting differently?" David stepped in, his voice rough. "No. She was happy. She was excited. It was the biggest day of her life." The news spread the way fire does in a dry field. By the time the graduation ceremony was set to begin, Ilara was no longer a person. She was a story, a rumor. An empty chair, draped in royal blue, was placed in the front row between her friends, Jess and Mark. It was a black hole on the stage, sucking all the joy from the room. Her parents were there. They had to be. They sat in the front row of the bleachers, two stone figures in a sea of smiling families. Anna held her husband's hand in a white-knuckled grip, her eyes fixed on the empty chair where her daughter was supposed to be. They were holding on to the last desperate thread of hope that she would walk in at any second, breathless and laughing. The principal walked to the podium. "Before we begin," he said, his voice heavy, "we must address the absence of one of our brightest students, our valedictorian, Ilara Vance." He paused. "Ilara has been reported missing. Her family and the police are looking for her. We ask that you all keep Ilara and the Vance family in your thoughts and prayers today." When it came time for the valedictorian speech, the principal simply said, "We will observe a moment of silence in honor of Ilara Vance." The silence that followed was deafening, heavier and more profound than any words she could have written. Then came the roll call, the moment that shattered Anna's composure. Ilara Vance. The name echoed in the vast, silent space. The empty chair sat under the spotlight, a heartbreaking monument to a future that had vanished. In the audience, Anna let out a small, choked sob, a sound of such pure agony that David had to wrap his arms around her, holding her together as she fractured apart. Her name was called and she wasn't there to answer. It was the first official record of her non-existence. The search escalated. Police canvassed the neighborhood, asking about a dark sedan. No one had seen it. The night had been completely, utterly quiet. The last ping from her phone was from her own bedroom just before midnight. Her bank account was untouched. Her social media was silent. She had left no footprints, digital or physical. It was as if she had been plucked from the world, leaving behind nothing but a perfect Ilara-shaped hole. And into that void, fear began to pour. The void Ilara left behind couldn't stay empty for long. In the absence of answers, whispers began to grow. Everyone became a detective. Everyone had a theory. She became a collage of rumors, a patchwork girl assembled from the fears and imaginations of others. The first theory was the simplest. She ran away. Police sat with her parents asking questions that were like tiny, sharp digs under the skin. Was Ilara under a lot of pressure? The valedictorian speech? Was it too much? She thrived on it. Her father answered, his voice low and dangerous. She wasn't the type to run from a challenge. The question felt like an accusation, suggesting a darkness in their home that didn't exist, painting them as the reason for her absence. The rumors at school were more specific. She had a secret boyfriend. The theory gained traction when they interviewed her friends. Her sweet, honest Jess gave them the anchor they were looking for. She She was acting a little strange this last week. She admitted to an officer, her voice trembling, distant, jumpy. Jess paused. But there was something else. A few days ago, she mentioned a man who stopped her on her walk home. He gave her a weird vibe, she said. Her words were meant to help, but they were gasoline on the fire. A strange man. The secret boyfriend theory darkened into something more sinister. Had she run away to meet him, or had he taken her? Theory 2. Abduction. This one brought a different kind of horror, introducing a faceless evil into their quiet town. Police took Jess's statement seriously. They pulled CCTV footage from the gas station on the corner. There, grainy and indistinct, was a dark sedan driving past around the time Alara would have been walking home. The same sedan she had seen from her window, but the license plate was a blur of pixels. It was a ghost, a dead end. But there was one thing that defied every story they told. One detail that was a quiet, constant rebuttal to all their theories. Her room. Detectives saw the white dress laid out. They saw her phone on the nightstand, her wallet on the dresser, her keys on their hook. They saw a room that was frozen in a moment of anticipation. None of the theories could explain why her room looked exactly like a girl who had just stepped out for a glass of water, fully intending to return to the life she had so carefully, so perfectly planned. Time is a merciless current. The initial frantic churn of the search settled. The yellow police tape came down. Ilara's face on the missing posters curled and faded in the sun and rain. The case was quietly moved into a metal filing cabinet drawer labeled Cold. The world moved on, but her family was frozen in the amber of that last night. Her room remained a shrine, a perfect time capsule. Her mother, Anna, cleaned it every week, dusting shelves that held no new memories. She refused to pack her daughter's things away, as to do so would be to admit defeat. She spoke about Alara in the present tense. A mother knows, she would tell her husband, her voice fierce with a conviction that defied all logic. She's alive. I feel her. Years passed. Her friends went off to college. Her brother, Leo, grew from a little boy who didn't understand into a young man who understood too much. And then, the echoes began. The tip calls started trickling in. Each call was a jolt to her parents' hearts, a cycle of soaring hope followed by a crushing crash back to reality. But one, 4 years after she vanished, was different. A social worker from a city 3 states away called about a Jane Doe she had been working with. The girl was Alara's age, had her eyes, and a scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood fall. She was quiet, terrified of being touched, and wouldn't give her name. But by the time the local authorities arrived at the shelter, she was gone. Vanished again. The not knowing was a special kind of torture. Then, on the 6th anniversary of her disappearance, something more chilling happened. Leo, now a brooding 16-year-old, was in his room when his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered and was met with silence. He was about to hang up when he heard it, a faint rhythmic sound, breathing, a slow, steady inhale and exhale. He froze. "Hello," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Ilara?" The breathing stopped. The line went dead. The police traced the call to a payphone at a bus station 1,000 miles away. The phone was wiped clean of prints. It was after the yearly vigil, on a quiet afternoon, that her mother found the final clue. She was in Ilara's room, dusting the back of the vanity mirror, when her fingers caught on a loose edge. She worked at it gently until a single, folded page from Ilara's journal came free. It had been tucked between the mirror and its wooden backing, hidden away. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the brittle yellowed paper. It was the page from the night Alara disappeared. Anna saw the happy entries about her own tears and her husband's camera work. But then she saw the last line, the one written in a grip of cold fear, the one that, until now, no one else had ever seen. Her breath caught in her chest as she read the words her daughter's ghost had been screaming all along. What if I disappear and no one understands why? That single folded piece of paper became the new center of the story. Anna held it as if it were a sacred text, its meaning both terrifyingly clear and impossibly opaque. That one sentence rewrote every theory, poisoned every memory. It was not the frantic scrawl of a girl who was abducted or the gleeful note of a runaway. It was a premonition of an ending she hadn't even known was coming. That note became the lens through which Alara's whole life was re-examined. If she was taken, it meant she knew someone was coming for her. It turned the tapping on her window from a possible dream into a final warning. But if she knew, why didn't she scream? What could have silenced her so completely? The single sentence hidden behind a mirror became the one clue that puzzled everyone. It was both a confession and a riddle. It was foresight. It was fear. It was a question that echoed through her family's life for years, unanswered. Years after the world has moved on, Anna sits in her daughter's room. She holds the faded piece of paper, the folds so deep they are almost tears. She is no longer the fierce woman who insisted Alara was alive. The years have worn down her certainty into a quiet, aching sorrow. "You know," she says to the empty room, her voice a soft murmur, "the hardest part isn't the not knowing where you are." She smooths the paper flat on her knee. "The hardest part is not knowing why. This note, it feels like you were trying to tell us something, trying to protect us from something." She looks up, her eyes landing on the empty space where Alara used to sit. "What were you so afraid of, Alara? What scared you so badly that leaving was the only answer you could find?" Her question hangs in the silence, a permanent resident in the house of her childhood. All the pieces are on the table. The perfect life, the waiting future, the dark car on the street, the tap on the window, the sightings, the silent phone call, the hidden, cryptic note. Her family is left standing on the edge of a question with no answer. Did she run? Or was she taken? Is it possible that the two are somehow the same? That she was running from something, and in running, she was caught? Could she still be out there, a ghost in another city? Or did her story end that night just hours before it was supposed to begin? In her room, untouched by time, her graduation cap still sits on the corner of her desk. The royal blue has faded slightly in the afternoon sun that has streamed through her window day after day, year after year. It sits there covered in a fine layer of dust, a perfect silent monument to the future that never was. Waiting. What do you think? Hit the subscribe button and comment below.